The car moved slowly through the city, windshield wipers sweeping back and forth like a metronome counting down something inevitable. No one spoke. Elias leaned against Claire's side, his head resting where her shoulder met her collarbone, as if his body already knew where it belonged. Claire kept one arm around him, cautious at first, then tighter, as though afraid the moment might dissolve if she loosened her grip. Adrian sat opposite them, hands clasped so firmly his knuckles whitened. He studied Claire in fragments, the curve of her cheek, the way her eyes kept drifting to Elias, memoizing him, confirming his reality. She looked at Adrian only once, briefly, and that single glance carried years of unsaid things. "You're not dead," Adrian said at last, his voice low, almost reverent. "No," Claire replied. "I was forgotten. There's a difference." Elias lifted his head. "Mom, do you remember my name?" Claire's breath hitched. "Elias," she said immediately, tears welling despite her effort to remain composed. "I whispered it every night, even when I thought I'd never see you." Adrian swallowed. He had chosen that name. He remembered holding his newborn son, believing grief had been neatly packaged and stored away. The lie of that belief now pressed against his chest. They reached the gates of Adrian's estate, iron bars gliding open silently. Claire stiffened as the house came into view, wide, immaculate, glowing with restrained luxury. "This isn't my world," she murmured. "It's not mine either," Adrian said, surprising even himself. "It just looks like it." Inside, staff froze mid-motion when Adrian entered with the woman from the street and a child holding her hand. Questions hovered in the air, but one look at Adrian's face sent everyone retreating. A warm room, a towel, clean clothes. Adrian ordered these things with the same efficiency he used in board meetings, but his hands trembled when he passed Claire a glass of water. She took it slowly, her fingers brushing his. The contact was electric, uncomfortable, familiar. "Tell me," Adrian said. "Tell me what happened." Claire stared into the glass as if the answer lived at the bottom. "The fire wasn't an accident," she said. "I told you I thought someone was watching me. You said I was being paranoid." Adrian flinched. "I survived," she continued. "Barely. When I came to, I was in a public ward under a false name. By the time I got out, you were gone. Your company had moved cities. Your number had changed. Lawyers told me you'd declared me dead." "I was told you didn't make it," Adrian said. "I looked for answers." "You looked long enough to feel absolved," she replied gently, which hurt far more than anger. Elias listened silently, absorbing every word, his small fingers intertwined with hers. "Why didn't you come to me?" he asked Adrian suddenly. The question struck clean and deep. Adrian crouched so they were eye level. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if I stopped moving forward, everything I built would collapse. Afraid that I wouldn't know how to be the man you needed." Elias considered this. "You could learn," he said simply. Claire watched that exchange with something like wonder, and something like grief. That night, Elias refused to sleep anywhere but beside her. Adrian stood in the doorway, watching as Claire traced gentle patterns on their son's hair, humming a melody he recognized instantly. It was the lullaby she used to sing when they were young and poor and hopeful. "You remember," Adrian said softly. "I never forgot," she answered. Sleep came in fragments for all of them. Adrian lay awake, memories unraveling, choices he had justified, people he had sidelined, moments he had missed. By morning, the weight of consequence settled heavily on his chest. The days that followed brought complications. Lawyers. Investigators. Old enemies stirred by Claire's reappearance. The story of the fire began to surface, and with it, uncomfortable truths about the early years of Adrian's rise, partners he had trusted too easily, deals that had attracted dangerous attention. Claire was quiet through it all, absorbing the world she had been absent from, learning Elias anew. She watched Adrian closely, not with accusation, but with a wary curiosity, as if deciding whether the man before her bore any resemblance to the one she once loved. One afternoon, she found Adrian alone in his study, staring at a framed photo of Elias as a toddler. "I missed everything," she said. "You missed nothing," Adrian replied. "His hair. That's what matters." She shook her head. "It matters how we got here." He nodded. "And it matters what we do next." Elias burst into the room, holding a drawing. 3 figures stood beneath a crooked sun, hands linked. "This is us," he announced proudly. Claire smiled, but her eyes shimmered. Adrian took the drawing and placed it on his desk, beside contracts worth more than entire cities. Outside the gates, reporters began to gather. Whispers spread. The perfect narrative of Adrian Blackwood's life had fractured, and the world sensed blood in the water. "You don't have to stay," Adrian told Claire one evening. "I won't trap you with guilt." Claire looked at Elias, who was laughing somewhere down the hall, alive and real and miraculous. "I didn't survive all that to run again," she said. "But I won't disappear for your convenience either." Adrian accepted that without protest. He was learning, slowly, painfully, that control was not the same as strength. As night fell, the estate lights flickered on, illuminating a household in quiet transformation. Somewhere deep within the walls of the life Adrian had constructed, foundations began to shift, old cracks widening, new possibilities forming, while questions without answers waited patiently, ready to demand their due as the fragile reunion moved forward, uncertain, unfinished, and trembling with everything still left to confront. The first true rupture came not from the outside world, but from within the walls Adrian had always believed were impenetrable. It began with a letter. Claire found it tucked between legal documents on the long dining table, an envelope yellowed with age, the paper inside creased and recreased as if it had been read too many times to count. It bore her name in handwriting she did not recognize, written before the fire, before everything splintered. She read it once standing, then again sitting, then a third time with her hand pressed to her mouth. When Adrian entered the room, she was still there, the letter trembling slightly in her grip. "You were warned," she said. Adrian froze. "About what?" "About me," Claire replied. "About the fire. About the people you were getting involved with." She held up the letter. "Someone tried to stop you." Adrian's mind raced. He took the letter, scanning the words he had dismissed years ago as paranoia from a junior partner who vanished shortly after. The letter spoke of offshore accounts, of silent investors who didn't tolerate loose ends, of a woman who knew too much simply by existing beside him. "I thought it was an attempt to scare me," Adrian said quietly. "I was wrong." Claire's eyes burned. "You always thought you were untouchable." "I know," he said. "And I was wrong about that too." That night, Elias overheard raised voices for the first time. He sat at the top of the stairs, listening as adults used words heavy with history and consequence. "You didn't just walk past me," Claire said. "You left me in danger." "I didn't know," Adrian replied, his composure cracking. "But I should have known. I chose ambition over caution. Over you." Elias stepped into the light then, small but resolute. "Stop," he said. "You're both here now." The argument dissolved in the face of his certainty. Claire knelt, pulling him into her arms. Adrian looked away, ashamed of how much it took a child to anchor them. The next morning, Adrian's security chief arrived earlier than usual, his expression grave. "The press isn't our biggest problem," he said. "Someone has been asking questions again." Quietly. Claire felt the old fear stir, sharp and familiar. "They know she's alive," Adrian said. "Yes," the chief replied. "And that changes things." Adrian doubled the security, cancelled meetings, shifted resources. For the first time in decades, his focus narrowed to a single point, protecting what he had nearly lost forever. Claire, however, refused to hide. She insisted on walking the grounds, on sitting in sunlight, on being visible. "I lived in the shadows for years," she said. "I won't do it again." Elias followed her everywhere, asking questions only children think to ask. "Were you lonely?" he asked one afternoon. "Every day," Claire answered honestly. "Are you lonely now?" She looked at him, at the house, at the man watching them from a distance. "No," she said. "I'm cautious." One evening, as thunder rolled across the sky, the power flickered. The lights went out briefly, plunging the estate into darkness. Claire's body reacted before her mind could catch up, heart racing, breath shallow. Adrian found her in the hallway, hands braced against the wall. "It's just the storm," he said gently. "So was the fire," she whispered. He didn't touch her. He simply stood there, present, unshielded by authority or solutions. When the lights returned, something between them had shifted, not healed, but acknowledged. Days later, a man from Adrian's past arrived unannounced, escorted by security. He was older now, his confidence dulled, but his eyes were sharp. "You should have let the past stay buried," the man said calmly. Some ghosts don't appreciate being resurrected. Adrian placed himself subtly between the man and Claire. She's not leverage, he said. She's family. The man smiled thinly. Family has always been your weakness. After he was escorted out, silence filled the room like smoke. That's one of them, Adrian said. One of the ones I trusted. And now? Claire asked. And now, Adrian replied, they know I'm vulnerable. That night, Adrian made a decision that would ripple outward in ways he could not yet predict. He began dismantling pieces of his empire, selling stakes, closing accounts, severing ties that once fueled his rise. Power, he was learning, could also be a liability. Elias noticed the changes in small ways. Fewer late nights. More dinners together. Adrian listening more than he spoke. One afternoon, Elias asked, "Are you going to lose everything?" Adrian knelt beside him. "Maybe some things," he said. "But not the things that matter." Claire watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. The danger did not retreat quietly. Anonymous messages began arriving. Warnings disguised as pleasantries. Reminders of what could be taken. Then, one evening, as Claire read to Elias in the sitting room, a stone shattered the window. The book fell from her hands as alarm screamed and security flooded the grounds. Adrian reached them in seconds, pulling Elias into his arms, his heart pounding with a fear he could no longer rationalize away. "This is why I never came back," Claire said through shaking breaths. "This is what follows you." Adrian held his son tighter. "Then I'll make it stop," he said, though he did not yet know how. Outside, blue lights flashed against the walls of the house, illuminating a family bound not just by love, but by shared risk. And as the night closed in around them, it became clear that surviving the past was only the beginning. The true test would be what they were willing to sacrifice to protect the fragile, dangerous future they had just begun to build, as unseen forces gathered and the cost of redemption loomed ever closer, unresolved and waiting. The house did not sleep that night. Security swept the grounds again and again, radios murmuring in low tones, boots crunching over gravel long after the glass had been cleared from the shattered window. Elias eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep in the panic room, his small hand wrapped tightly around Claire's sleeve as if letting go might invite the dark back in. Claire sat beside him, her body rigid, memories rising uninvited. Every sudden sound pulled her back to smoke-filled hallways and the roar of flames. Adrian watched her from across the room, seeing not just fear but endurance, the quiet, stubborn will that had carried her through years he had never imagined. "I won't let them do this to him," Adrian said softly, breaking the silence. Claire did not look up. "You couldn't stop it before." "No," he admitted. "But I was protecting my empire then. Now I'm protecting my son." That distinction mattered more than any vow. By morning, the attack had already shifted the narrative. News outlets speculated about intimidation, rivals, internal power struggles. Adrian gave no statements. Instead, he summoned people he had not spoken to in years, former allies, silent watchers, men and women who understood the language of consequence. Claire watched him prepare like a man shedding skin. The polished executive gave way to something leaner, sharper, more honest. It frightened her almost as much as it reassured her. Later that day, she found Elias in the garden, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, arranging stones into careful lines. "What are you building?" she asked. "A map," he said, "so we don't get lost." She smiled sadly. "We already are a little lost." Elias shook his head. "No. We just took the long way." Inside, Adrian met with a woman named Mara Voss, an investigator whose loyalty could not be bought, only earned. She listened as Adrian laid out the past, the deals, the threats, the fire, the man who had come to the house. "You didn't just anger powerful people," Mara said. "You embarrassed them by surviving. By bringing her back, you're rewriting a story they thought was finished." "What do they want?" Adrian asked. "Control," Mara replied. "And silence." Claire later insisted on speaking with Mara herself. She described the night of the fire, the voices she heard, the smell of accelerant. Details she had never shared before, not even with Adrian. "You remembered all this," Adrian said afterward. "I had to," Claire replied. "For years, memory was the only proof I had that I wasn't imagining my own life." As the investigation deepened, the pressure increased. Adrian's companies lost contracts overnight. Longtime partners distanced themselves. Stock values dipped. The world that once bent to Adrian's will began to resist him openly. Elias noticed the tension immediately. "Are they trying to take our house?" he asked one evening. "They can't take us," Adrian said, choosing his words carefully. "Houses are just walls." "But walls keep things safe," Elias replied. Claire knelt beside him. "People do too," she said. "When they stand together." That night, Claire found herself standing in Adrian's study, staring at shelves of awards and photographs she had never been part of. "You built all this without me," she said quietly. "I built it because I lost you," Adrian answered. "Or thought I did." She turned to him then. "And if I'd never come back?" He didn't hesitate. "Then I would have died with everything intact." The truth of that settled heavily between them. The next threat came quietly. A call placed to a private number, a voice distorted but unmistakably amused. Adrian listened without speaking, his face hardening with each word. When he hung up, Claire knew before he spoke. "They want me gone," she said. "They want you silent," Adrian replied. "There's a difference. And if I refuse?" Adrian met her gaze. "Then they'll escalate." Elias overheard enough to understand danger, if not its shape. That night, he climbed into Adrian's bed for the first time in years. Adrian let him stay, holding his son while staring at the ceiling, counting regrets like cracks in plaster. In the days that followed, Adrian did something unthinkable. He opened old files, evidence of crimes committed by men more powerful than himself. Information he had once buried to survive. He began transferring copies to places beyond reach. Mara warned him. "This isn't a shield," she said. "It's a fuse." "Good," Adrian replied. "Let it burn." Claire watched these choices with conflicted eyes. She had survived by staying invisible. Adrian was choosing exposure, confrontation. Two instincts forged by pain, now colliding. "You don't have to destroy yourself to protect us," she said one evening. "I already did that once," he replied. "This time, I'll choose differently." The breaking point came when Elias disappeared. Not taken, just gone from the garden for 3 unbearable minutes that stretched into terror. When security found him at the edge of the property, talking to a stranger beyond the fence, Adrian's restraint shattered. The man fled before questions could be asked. Elias cried in Claire's arms. "He said he knew my mom," he sobbed. "He said you were lying to us." Adrian felt something dark and precise settle into place. The line had been crossed. That night, he made his final preparations. Claire sensed it immediately, the calm before irreversible action. "You're going to war," she said. "Yes," Adrian answered. "But not with guns." He kissed Elias on the forehead as he slept, lingering longer than usual, memoizing the weight of him. Claire watched from the doorway, her heart torn between fear and a fragile, dangerous hope. Outside, the city lights flickered in the distance, indifferent and vast. Inside the house, 3 lives hung in delicate balance, bound together by love, truth, and the escalating cost of refusing to disappear, while forces set in motion long ago began closing in, unstoppable, as the next move loomed just ahead, unfinished and waiting. Dawn arrived not with peace, but with clarity. Adrian stood alone on the terrace as the sky softened from black to bruised blue, the city below unaware that an empire was about to confess its sins. In his hand was a slim drive, no larger than a finger, yet heavy enough to crush names that ruled markets and men alike. For years, power had taught him silence. Love, he was learning, demanded the opposite. Behind him, Claire watched through the glass. She saw not the billionaire, not the strategist, but the man who had once held her hand in a tiny apartment and promised her the world without knowing how cruel that promise could become. She stepped outside, the morning air cool against old scars. "If you do this," she said quietly, "there's no undoing it." Adrian nodded. "I know." "And if it destroys everything you built?" He turned to her then, eyes steady, stripped of ambition. "Then it was built on the wrong foundation." Inside, Elias slept curled around the drawing he had made days earlier, the crooked sun, the 3 figures holding hands. Claire had almost taken it from him for safekeeping, but something told her to leave it where it was, like a compass pointing toward what mattered. The press conference was scheduled for noon. By 10, rumors were already boiling. By 11, powerful phones rang unanswered. When Adrian finally stepped onto the stage, the room was packed with reporters, cameras poised like weapons, the air thick with expectation. He did not bring lawyers.
He did not bring prepared statements. He brought truth.
"My name is Adrian Blackwood," he began, his voice carrying without strain. "For decades, I have benefited from systems designed to protect the powerful and erase the inconvenient. I told myself that survival justified silence. I was wrong."
Murmurs rippled.
He spoke of secret investors, of intimidation disguised as partnership, of a fire meant to remove a liability, a woman who knew too much simply by standing beside him.
He did not sanitize his role.
He named his failures, his fear, his complicity. "This," he said, holding up the drive, "contains evidence.
Financial trails. Recorded conversations.
Names. I am releasing it to independent investigators, journalists, and international courts."
Gasps. Shouts. Chaos.
"I am doing this," Adrian continued, unflinching, "because a child reminded me that wealth means nothing if you step over humanity to protect it." Somewhere behind the cameras, a phone rang and rang until someone finally answered it. Too late. Within hours, the world ignited. Arrests were announced. Markets trembled. Men who once moved unseen were dragged into daylight. Adrian's companies collapsed in waves, their value dissolving like mist under a rising sun. At the estate, Claire watched the coverage with Elias sitting beside her, his head resting against her arm.
"Is Dad in trouble?" he asked.
"Yes," she answered honestly. "Did he do the right thing?"
She kissed the top of his head. "Yes."
"Even when it hurts?"
When Adrian returned that evening, he did not arrive in a motorcade.
He came alone, exhaustion etched deep into his face.
Claire met him at the door.
For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of everything passing silently between them.
"It's done," he said. Claire nodded.
"Then come home." Elias ran to him, arms wrapping tight around his waist. Adrian sank to his knees, holding his son as if the world might try to take him again. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was relentless. Accounts frozen. Properties seized. Former allies vanished. Adrian Blackwood's name became synonymous not with power, but with reckoning. They moved to a smaller house by the sea, quiet and unremarkable. There were no gates, no guards, no illusion of invincibility. At night, the sound of waves replaced sirens and alarms. Adrian learned how to cook poorly and laugh at it. He learned Elias's routines, his fears, his unfiltered joy. Claire watched cautiously at first, then with growing warmth, as consistency replaced grand gestures. One evening, as the sun bled gold into the water, Claire finally spoke the question she had carried for years. "If you had seen me that night on the street, before Elias spoke, would you have stopped?" Adrian did not hesitate. "I don't know," he said. "And that's the truth that shames me most." Claire studied him, then nodded. "Then we start from there." They did not rush forgiveness. They did not pretend the past could be erased. Instead, they built something slower, truer, shaped by honesty rather than illusion. Months later, Elias stood in his classroom, telling his teacher about his parents. "My dad used to be very rich," he said. "Now he's very brave." That night, Adrian found the old drawing pinned above Elias's bed. He added something quietly while the boy slept, a small door beneath the crooked sun, open wide. Claire watched from the doorway. "What's that?" she whispered. "A way forward," Adrian replied. Outside, the sea moved endlessly, patient and forgiving. And inside that modest home, 3 lives, once broken by ambition, silence, and fear, found something far rarer than wealth. They found each other. Not perfectly. Not easily. But completely.